Hello, my friends. As we explore quantum reality and beyond and the nature of existence, I want to share with you an idea. And the idea is that Buddhist philosophy offers a better explanation for existence, or shall I say, the nature of existence, than current current science, and that includes relativity and includes quantum mechanics. So let's first examine Buddhist principles. So, there's a principle in Buddhism called anicca, impermanence. And what this principle says that everything in the universe is in constant flux and nothing remains ever the same. This applies to physical forms, emotions, thoughts, and experiences. And then also, Buddhist philosophy applies this principle to the nature of our own existence as an extension of impermanence. So, the extension of impermanence in Buddhist philosophy and understanding leads to actually very existential conundrum that addresses our own suffering. Clinging to impermanent things leads to suffering, and ultimately they will change and cause disappointment. Everything will change and cause disappointment. So if you cling, the goal is to achieve detachment and acceptance of this impermanence. Now, modern physics addresses the same thing without addressing human suffering. But according to physics and the laws of thermodynamics, there's a first law and the second law. The first law says energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form or another. And the second law, it says in closed systems, entropy or disorder tends to increase over time and ultimately leads to a state of maximum entropy, the heat death of absolute zero. So both these philosophies and science actually emphasize change and transformation. Both Buddhists and scientists acknowledge that nothing remains static. They focus, of course, on different aspects. Buddhism focuses on the emotional and psychological implications of change, while thermodynamics analyze the physical processes involved. Buddhism aims for attachment and acceptance to change to reduce suffering, while thermodynamics deals with the physical laws governing those changes. Therefore, there are points of correspondence, but also these concepts are approached a little differently. But now let's examine some more corresponding principles. So in Buddhism, not only everything is subject to decay, but objects do not have intrinsic inherent reality. In science, objects have intrinsic reality. Even though I maintain I favor the Buddhist side, because what we call objects are perceptual activities, species specific, as I've explained before, and no object has inherent existence, but science says they do. The objects are observer independent. So that's a difference. And I favor the Buddhist perspective that you need an observer to know the nature of an object. And ultimately, the nature of the object is a changing perceptual activity which corresponds to the laws of thermodynamics. So there's a difference. Now, there's a third difference or similarity or correspondence, and that is in Buddhism, there's a phrase as popularized by Thich Nhat Hanh, the great spiritual teacher: we are inter-beings that inter-arise in the inter-isness. which means that every object and even the perceiver of the object is entangled with the totality of existence. Once again, you and the as the observer, and the entire universe is entangled, non-locally entangled with everything that's happening in the universe, every activity in all of existence. Entanglement also, or non-local correlation, is the corresponding principle in science. What else? So there's clinging and grasping, intrinsic nature of objects, and correlation, entanglement, very similar. The only difference then ultimately comes down to science does not address the modes of knowing, or it does. The modes of knowing are instruments, microscopes, ultra, microscopic instruments that explore the ultra microscopic realm, and then telescopes that explore the infinite vastness of the universe. So with extension of our senses, a mode of knowing occurs that we call objective reality, which is where the problem is. That's naive realism, while Buddhism actually comes to the same conclusion of entanglement, but involves the observer as part of existence. If you do not involve the observer as part of the existence, then your science is incomplete because it's based on observation. So science is currently incomplete, and science, of course, does not address that which is observing in detail, although Schrödinger and Max Planck and the pioneers of quantum mechanics did address the observer. But current science says observer-independent reality, naive realism, and makes progress on those bases. But the more progress it makes, the more deeper our anguish of existential suffering. Who are we in this whole thing? As Rumi said, who am I? In the midst of it, this thought traffic, because without the I am asking the questions, there's no answer. Either way, Buddhism or scientific inquiry. So let me know, what is describing existence more accurately? What is closer to truth, Buddhism or contemporary science that includes quantum mechanics and relativity? I'm very curious to know your reaction to this.